Hello, everyone. Welcome to GooCampus. So, today we have a very special guest with us. So, today we have Dr. Abhishek Ray. Dr. Ray is a specialty registrar in gastroenterology and hepatology in the NHS UK. He holds the MRCP and is currently progressing through specialty training. Alongside his clinical work, Doctor is also actively involved in medical education. He teaches and mentors doctors preparing for the MRCP PCS exam and has been recognized with awards for excellence in teaching. So, in today's conversation, we will talk about the different pathways for IMGs, that is for international doctors to work in the UK. We will speak on how the system has evolved over the years. We will also talk about opportunities available within and beyond the NHS, the recent discussions around training prioritization, and his advice for doctors planning this journey. So, a very warm welcome to you, Doctor. Thank you so much for taking time for being with us here today.
Thank you, Ashwini. It's really good to finally meet you all in face because I've been basically going through your platform since quite a while. And thank you for inviting me to your program and asking me to share my experiences, which I'd be very glad to do so.
Thank you.
Sure. So, from my personal perspective, I joined medical school in India in the year 2006, and I did it from a state called Tripura. For people who are not particularly aware, Tripura is one of the states in Northeast India, the Seven Sisters, and we were the founder batch of our medical school. So from the very beginning, my journey was more of like self-research, trial and error method. And although there was one of the things that we were the super seniors from the very first year to the very last year, that was a different experience in itself. But in terms of getting a senior guidance, which I'm sure a lot of my junior medical colleagues would agree with, that is invaluable with regards to the journey of a doctor from a student to being a professional clinician. Now, I finished my medical school in 2012. That's including the internship. And since then, I have been initially trying with the Indian exams, but in my mind, I always wanted to explore the foreign shows. Now, when I was in my third or the fourth year, I was pretty much undecided whether I want to go for the USMND or whether I want to go for the UK. I was not particularly very familiar with the Australian pathway or the New Zealand pathway because I would say for a lack of guidance, and mostly the people I used to speak with, they were either in the US or in UK. So when I initially went to research for the US pathways, I found it extremely cumbersome, really expensive, and most importantly, US is pretty far away from India geographically. So if you have got a family in India and then you want to move to the US, it takes a lot of time to commute. The UK is geographically much more closer to India. Secondly, our Indian curriculum is based on the old British curriculum. It's very interesting. And I only got to know it once I got to experience both the systems. But the US curriculum is very different because the way they manage patients, way they go about diagnosing patients is very different to the ones that we do in the UK. So I finally decided on concentrating on the UK journey. And in the year 2012 and 13 is when I was preparing for MRCP because my initial plan was that I'd probably do my postgrads in India because that's the usual advice from any senior professional or any senior colleague you might speak with. But then I realized that that's actually not ideal because preparation for NEET and preparation for the UK journey, be it PLAB or be it the Royal College exams, is very different. And often it's like, if you prepare for both, it's like putting both legs in two different boats and then very difficult not to fall down in the river. So in 2014, I finally decided to fully concentrate on the UK pathway. Now, as I'd mentioned, the reason I mentioned that I was the founder batch of my med school was because no one in my med school had actually ventured abroad, which is why the General Medical Council in the UK did not recognize our college. It was not in the database. And I only found it out once I started to register for the GMC in order to
Registration when you initiate the process.
Exactly. And then they had asked for my university. And when I was scrolling down the names, I was like, wait a minute, where is my university? How do I put it back? And then the next thing was I called up the council and they said, well, you need to send up some paperwork. And then the paperwork, then it was a long journey because what they wanted me to send, I had no idea. So I only got in touch with my college And my college literally had no idea what are they asking for. And I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Because I have only been sort of involved with my studies, my degrees, etc. I had no clue about administrative work. And then they asked for things like clock hours and stuff. So it so happened that one of my colleagues, which unknown to me, had ventured out to Dubai and he had got a similar certificate. So my college authority said, okay, let's give you a certificate similar to this. And then I sent it to GMC, and GMC were like, okay, you don't fulfill the number of clock hours, so we can't register you. I was like, wait, our university follows the same curriculum as every other university in India. Northeast, like Assam Medical College and Guwahati Medical College, are already impaneled in their university lists. And I was like, they follow the same thing. We follow the same thing. How is it that you are recognizing them and not recognizing us? And then there was a lot of to and fro, to and fro. And then finally we got to know that our college was actually not putting in our clinical hours in the third and the fourth year as the number of clock hours. And as soon as they put it there, because it's there, and I can't blame anyone because they were doing it for the first time too. And then the number of clock hours exceeded 5,500 hours. And James was like, okay, fine. We are now happy with it. We can now accept you. So my university finally got empaneled in their list. And by the time I already gone there, I found out that the space for IELTS were all gone. At that time, back in 2014, they were not accepting OET. So I was getting a place for IELTS and everything. So I missed out 2 dates of PLAB because it was all booked out. And then I realized, okay, let me not waste time. Let's just go through the MRCP pathway. And as I went through the MRCP pathway, as I cleared part one, this whole, should I say, drawback with the PLAB journey actually helped me because I went through the MTA pathway. And then that pathway, the main requirement is you should not have appeared for PLAB. As it happened that I was going through the MTI pathway and had already cleared MRCP part one. And one of the prerequisites for the MTI pathway was that you cannot appear or fail PLAB. And I was like, okay, it's come out of the blessing in disguise because I would have appeared PLAB and then it would have been the whole PLAB journey all through. So I went into UK in 2018, started as a foundation doctor despite working as a critical care registrar in Kolkata. So I'd start from the junior pathway, and that's recommended because you need to be familiar with the system of another country. And I was going through the MRCP pathway, and between my MRCP part 2 and my MRCP paces, COVID hit, exams were stopped. So my career took another 3 years. And now, after almost 10 years after graduation, I got into my specialty training, and I'm now 2 years away from reaching the end of the journey, should I say.
That's nice. So, Doctor, generally what I've understood is MTA pathways for postgraduates, right? But you got in via MTA pathways, eh?
Yeah. So this is one of the very big misconceptions because it's not completely true. It's partially true. So MTA pathway is a pathway which is purely run by the Royal Colleges. Now, there are various Royal Colleges. So there is Royal College of Physicians for Medicine. There is Royal College of Surgeons for Surgeons. Similarly for pediatrics, therefore obstetrics and gynecology, anesthesia, psychiatry. So every college has got their own sets of rules. Now, the MTA pathway used to be a postgraduate pathway, but again, as we all know, everything depends on supply and demand. So for surgeons, for anesthetists, for psychiatrists, yes, it's a postgraduate pathway. For the Royal College of Physicians, there are 3 Royal Colleges of Physicians actually, and both, although 3 of them are sister colleges, they both have their own separate administration. So Edinburgh and Glasgow, they do ask for post-graduation, ideally. Okay. London, at that point of time, were allowing people who were either postgraduates or full MRCP or MRCP Part 1, 3 years experience. That includes internship, but in active employment over the last 5 years and the language test. So if you were fulfilling all these criteria, then you can go and sit for interviews. Doctor, now understanding, because in your long career, you would have met so many doctors out there in the UK. Can you briefly tell our audience today, what are the different pathways to work in the UK now that's currently existing? Sure. So the pathway to working there in terms of being like a doctor at any level is the GMC registration. That is common. So unless and until you are registered with their council, you cannot work as a clinician there. Now, the most commonly used pathway or availed pathway is the PLAB pathway, which I'm sure many of our listeners today are familiar with. The PLAB questions are set at the level of Foundation Year 1 training, and Foundation Year 1 is equivalent to internship. It is, I would say, a very big myth when people say that PLAB exam is easy. It is not easy. It is absolutely not easy. It is not difficult, but not difficult is not equal to easy. You need to have a very good concepts about the various topics of medical science, be it medicine, surgery, gynecology, pediatrics, ophthalmology, ENT, so on and so forth. So no, I would not say it's an easy pathway. It's you need to have a good knowledge base. So that is PLAB. So you do PLAB 1 in India, you can sit in India, you can sit in UK, you can sit in various parts of the world. In the PLAB 2 is appeared from only in the UK, and that obviously necessitates people to go there, pay for the exam, and come back. But because the PLAB 2 exam is so different from the Indian curriculum, so say for example, they give a lot of stress on communication and patient encounters, something that is hardly covered here in India. Like, there is a way of saying some things. There are things that you can't tell the patients. There are ways to professionally sugarcoat things. So these are the things that you are not taught in India. Whereas back in the UK, those are the parameters that you need to be fulfilling in order to pass the PLAB 2 exam. And once you clear your PLAB 2, then you are eligible for the GX registration. You can apply for jobs. The other pathway is the Royal College pathway. So say, for example, someone's doing their post-graduation in India and they think that, okay, fine, while doing my post-graduation, let me say, for example, a medicine postgraduate trainee thinks that, okay, let me appear for the MRCP exam. So in my 3 years, I'll go through the exam all by itself. So once you have cleared your MRCP and then you have done your language test, which in case is IELTS or OET now accepted, you are eligible for GX registration via the Royal College pathway. So you can completely bypass PLAB. The third pathway is unknown to majority of people, or there are a lot of misconceptions, and that is the Medical Training Initiative, or MTI, or sponsorship pathway. If someone goes in detail and thoroughly through the General Medical Council's website, they will find the mention of the sponsorship pathway, but for some reason, people tend to either overlook them or they don't want to do much research into it because they think that sponsorship means someone sponsoring them with money, but there is nothing related to money about this sponsorship pathway. So this is the third pathway. Now, every Royal College has its own sets of rules that governs this pathway. I am only aware about the Royal College of Physicians as the medicine pathway because that's the pathway I took. So what happens is with the Royal College MTI pathway, what you need to do is either a full postgraduate degree like an MD medicine in India, or a full MRCP, or MRCP Part 1 in the last 3 years, 3 years of experience in the last 5 years, and that includes internship, language test. And while applying for the MTI pathway, you need to be an active job without any break. So say, for example, someone has worked for 3 years and prior to applying for the MTI pathway, they have taken, say, 2 or 3 weeks of break. Then you are straight away ineligible because they do not accept any sort of breaks in your professional career. So for someone who is thinking on the lines of the MTI particularly, I would strongly recommend not to take any sort of breaks. Yeah, 1 week is something they might accept because you can take breaks for so many reasons. Personal reasons, family bereavements, maternity, etc. But long time leaves is something they look very adversely upon. So this is the other pathway. So once you fulfill those criteria, and then there are two pathways. So what happens is either the Royal College conducts an interview. So the trusts who want to recruit doctors from abroad, they get in touch with the Royal Colleges, tell them that, okay, we need doctors from your side. So the Royal College goes and interviews people. So my interview was done in Lissi Hospital in Kerala, and that was attended by the Royal College affiliated physicians. I know them because I see them now every day. So they came, they did the interview, and once you clear the interview, what they do is then they match your CV with various hospitals, and those hospitals then provide you an interview. If the Royal College is not doing an interview at this point of time, because they don't always do it, secondly, only wherever they do the interview, say for example, they're doing in India, only Indian nationals can attend that interview, no one else. Similarly, like if they're conducting the interview in Bangladesh, no one else apart from Bangladesh citizens can attend the interview. So there is no set timetable as to when they want to do the interviews. So if someone wants to go much more quickly than waiting for these interviews, what they can do is they can approach the trusts and ask them that whether they want to recruit through this pathway. And then if they're successful in the interview, then what you need to do is you need to contact the Royal Colleges and give them all the paperwork that this was the interview done, you are already cleared, the trust has to send the paperwork, and then the Royal College facilitates the whole thing. This involves an administrative fee which needs to be paid to the Royal College by the candidate. But in the previous pathway, the trusts pay to the Royal College, so the candidates don't have to pay it.
So if you wish to speak to Doctor one-on-one to understand which pathway works better for you or which pathway should you consider now, then you can certainly book a session with Doctor on GooCampusWorld.com. Now the important question is, yes, there are pathways available, but how has the system changed, Doctor? Over all these years, we know after PLAB, yes, doctors can apply for a job, but practically they're finding it hard to get a job. Now, via MTI, yes, as you said, doctors can apply for job, but again, they're finding it hard to get a job faster. They're not getting proper responses from the HR side. This is what most of the doctors say. We are applying, but there's no response. So can you tell us how the system has changed in these years?
I would phrase it in a way that the system hasn't changed. The pathways are still the same, and no one's doing anything wrong. They're all doing the right thing. It is all a question of supply versus demand. Now, we need to understand that every country tries to make things available for the citizens, and they would only go for overseas labor if they are unable to fill that shortage with domestic candidates. Now, in the UK, and this is all hearsay because I was not there at that time, is 20 years back, we had the same situation where they had less number of jobs compared to applicants. So they were prioritizing domestic trainees. And in between 2012 onwards, and obviously it got much more expedited and aggravated during the COVID times when they needed so many doctors to staff the hospitals, that they opened the pathway and there were a lot more jobs compared to the supply. The demand was more, the supply was less, which meant that whenever people were applying, most of them ended up getting a job.
Correct.
But we also need to remember that the trust spends a lot. And when I say trust, it's basically the hospital management. It's termed trust in the UK. The trust spend quite a lot of money to recruit international candidates. And that includes paying around 3,000 or 4,000 pounds for the certificate of sponsorship or the course, which is required by the candidates to apply for the visa. So if they are appointing a candidate who does not require a visa or who has got residential rights or who is a citizen, then they save 4,000 pounds on this particular thing. So they would always want to take those candidates. Secondly, as the employment crisis worsened, especially around COVID and just post-COVID, the government realized that they need to scale up the number of domestic doctors, and which is why they have now started to expand medical schools. So there are more medical schools now compared to when I was there. And with more medical schools, it's taking in around like 100 to 150 students per batch. So every year, there is more domestic doctors coming out. And as a result, that dearth of supply is now made up. So the number of jobs which are available to apply is much less compared to what it was before. Secondly, there are a lot of associate professionals, I would say, like physician assistants, advanced clinical practitioners, who more or less do the jobs of the junior clinical professionals. Now, it's a different debate as to whether they are safe to do those jobs or not. And there is a whole lot of controversy and debates going on in the UK as to whether they should substitute doctors or not. The government has clearly recommended that they should not be used to substitute doctors.
Dr. Arvind, let's say if once someone has UK clinical experience, what global opportunities open up? Like, do countries like USA, Australia, New Zealand, or UAE value UK clinical training? Or is it just about someone who's got CCT will have direct entry to these countries?
So the countries that you have mentioned, the answer is basically a combination of both. So some countries do encourage doctors at a much more junior level to come there following the UK experience. For example, Australia and New Zealand, their competitive authority pathway is something that doctors after 1 year of UK experience post GMC registration, or for UK graduates after they complete their foundation year training, both the years, can straight away apply for jobs there, and that bypasses the AMC exams. In Australia, it all depends on whether you need to be first going into an area of need, which is mostly the rural areas, or if you can get into a mainstream city like Melbourne or Sydney. So this is the competitive standards pathway. And this is the same for New Zealand also. Then there are certain specialties like general practice, emergency medicine, my understanding psychiatry. These ones are in high demand. So then they take the doctors straight away from there, from the UK. For the doctors who have done CCT, So at the consultant level, they need to be going onto the specialist pathway,
Okay.
which again has got its own sets of rules and regulations, like doing the FRCP exam, doing a clinical assessments or something. Again, I'm not 100% familiar with the routes on those countries,
Okay.
but these are the very sort of, I would say, superficial knowledge that I have about them. In Canada, it's the same. Again, it is only for people who have got CCT. So it's like things like general practice, A&E, in only certain areas of Canada. So like Nova Scotia, etc. They have a more requirement of doctors because no one wants to. These places are so remote that no one wants to go there. So they are trying to make the market more attractive for international medical graduates
Okay.
from any country. The US, it's very interesting. So US has historically not wanted to recognize anything. So yeah, they value UKCCT, but they do not want to consider it equivalent for
Okay.
candidates to go there. Anyone who wants to work in the US needs to sit for the USMLE, clear all the 3 parts or 2 parts now. So that is common.
Now, many candidates do ask, especially from India, they ask, is MRCP equivalent to MD? Like if I pass my part 1, part 2 paces, is it equivalent to MD in India?
I can understand where this question comes from because that is something that used to happen historically. That is something that I was being told that if you're not getting MD, just do an MRCP and you will be considered equivalent to an MD. So in India, things work in a very different manner, wherein it all depends on how you are able to create your patient base, how much you are able to make the patients trust you. Yes, I mean, I have in certain hospitals I have worked at, I'm not going to divulge the names, but in certain hospitals I have worked at, I have seen consultants with MBBS MRCP only, and nothing's written. But if you want to theoretically check it, MRCP, yes, I would say MRCP is something that needs to be completed or passed in order to achieve completion for internal medicine training or IMT training, which is of 3 years. And IMT is equivalent to MD in medicine. But you cannot write IMT over here because no one understands that. I need to also clarify that degrees from 5 countries, UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, are recognized by NMC, and you can literally come and work here as an MRCP. Whether the certain hospital wants to appoint you on that basis as a consultant is completely at their discretion. It could be a consultant, it could be a junior consultant, it could be a senior registrar, then slow step up to a consultant. It's again like that because MRCP is becoming very common these days. A lot of people are appearing for it. So it used to have a very certain niche to it, say a decade or more than a decade back. Now it's more or less common. And anyone who has worked in the UK or who has done IMT in the UK, it's mandatory. So they have to clear MRCP. So they would automatically get an MRCP after that.
And so, Doctor, recently, there's been a lot of discussion around the Medical Training Prioritization Bill. I think most of the listeners will be waiting for this segment. So, from your perspective, what could this mean for IMGs planning to build their careers in the UK? We still have many interests, many doctors. They still do call and say, this is what I'm looking for. UK is the country that I wanted to go. Now, with this act or with this bill coming into the picture, I know they're confused what to do. So can you briefly tell us what does it mean for IMGs who are interested, who are exploring UK?
Things have become very tricky now. And I don't want to give anyone false reassurances. I don't want to paint a false rosy picture. I would rather candidates know the reality before taking a decision as to whether the pathway is worth pursuing or not. I don't want to encourage anyone. I don't want to discourage anyone because I think people's motivations are different. So someone who is superbly motivated to explore the UK pathway would want to be resilient and just achieve it no matter how. Whereas someone may think that, okay, this is not worth it. So with the recent medical training prioritization bill, and I must also say that this is still under a lot of development because what we know as of now is that graduates from UK medical colleges, and I'm not saying citizens. So say, for example, an Indian student wants to pursue medicine in the UK, they will get classed as a UK graduate. And I say MBBS. When I say medicine, it's MBBS. UK graduates are prioritized for any post, which means that, say, for example, there is an application process, there is interview, there is ranking, and an international medical graduate ranks 1, but there are, say, for example, 20 seats, and the UK graduate ranks 100. but in between 1 and 100, there are 21 seats. So the person who has ranked 1 will miss out. Not fair, but this is how it is. There are certain priority groups, and they are still under construction. So the government is still sort of, questioning on it. And this is all because the supply has massively outgrown demand, which means that a lot of UK graduates are unemployed. They are not getting jobs. And they are making a massive sort of representation to the government that you need to think about domestic graduates first and then think about international students. Some of the representations are courteous professional. Some of them are outright vile. I do not want to bring that over here, but I would say things are a bit tricky. We would know a better picture by the end of this year as to who would be prioritized. There is a debate on whether the IMGs who have worked in the NHS for 2 years should be in the priority group or not. Their point is no, they need to work for 5 years. There is a lot of to and fro going on. We are trying to advocate for the IMGs. So it is all a matter of what the government will decide. But yes, it makes things pretty difficult. Whoever wants to pursue this pathway, they might end up getting a GMC registration and not getting a job for 2 to 3 years or 4 years. But again, they might get a job straight away depending on how early they want to appoint a candidate. So which is why I would say if you can wait, if you are so motivated that you want UK only, then I would say absolutely go for it. But if someone says, no, I don't have much time, I want to do my postgraduates in India and then try, that is also okay. If I was having this conversation 1 year back, I would have said, no, concentrate on one. But with circumstances, things change. So I have to now tailor my advice accordingly. Yes, it's unfair, but sadly, we have very little control on how educational policies of a foreign country would be designed.
So thank you so much for your time, Doctor. Now, Doctor, this is for all our listeners who are preparing for MRCP, whether it could be part 1, part 2, or PACES. If they have doubts or if they want to talk to someone who can guide them, who can mentor them, can they connect with you? Can they book a one-on-one session with you? Or is it just for MRCP PACES?
No, I can advise for both, all the parts of MRCP. The only reason I say that I teach for MRCP PACES is because MRCP Part 1 and Part 2 is purely theory exams and it's all MCQ. So there is not much to guide over there. Yes, I can give advices on where to study from, what sort of questions are asked. But PACES is a clinical exam with a lot of emphasis on communication, how to examine patients, how to present patients. IMGs have been classically seen to struggle with presentation because very clearly English is not their first language. And in the hospitals also, we are used to presenting patients in our vernacular language. So that is a major bit of struggle. And it's not only fresh international graduates. When I'm basically teaching them in our academy, there is a significant difference between the presentation styles of British graduates versus international medical graduates. And for international medical graduates who are in the UK, I usually tend to advise them that try to get a study partner who is a British person or who is a citizen of there, has been born and brought up from there, because there are certain buzzwords in English, which if you use, then it makes you sound more polished and it makes you a better presenter. So yes, I mean, I'm more than happy to guide anyone in all the 3 parts, but one-on-one, like, face-to-face teaching or supervising skills, it's only needed for PACES, and which is why it needs more active involvement on my side.
Okay, understood, Doctor. So thank you so much. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for your time and all the very best to all our listeners. Do you have any last piece of line, Doctor, for our listeners today?
I would say if you are really motivated to pursue your pathway, be it UK, be it US, be it Australia, anywhere else, or even if it's in India, you will come across people who will encourage you, who will come across people who will discourage you. And the key is not to lose your motivation, because often I have faced that when I used to say that I want to go to the UK, people used to discourage me saying all sorts of things. 99.9% of them were complete false stuff. There's absolutely no truth in it. So if you want to take advice from anyone, take it from someone who is in the UK, not from someone who has never explored UK or has never gone there or is just telling you from hearsay, because hearsays are mostly myths rather than facts. Get advices from people who are in the pathway, because they would be able to give you authentic advice.
True. Thank you so much. So that's why you have GooCampus World. Any of you, whether you're looking at UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, we have almost, I think, mentors from all countries. If you want to get genuine guidance, advice, seek from people who are already in the healthcare system, who can guide you better. I think, as Doctor mentioned, we've also said this many times. Many people read online many things and they reach out to us, but that's all not true. Talk to people, real people who are experiencing the system, who already done before you. Take the right advice and then go ahead. Thank you so much.